What sort
I'm
of
not
things
sure,
would
but
make
I
you
feel
content?
like that's a hill I would die on. I'm not definite, but I feel that's a hill I would die on. Life's not worth living without pleasure.
Welcome to Think Twice, your favourite philosophy show. Here we're going to talk about ethics, morality. We'll cover some heavy topics, but lighten it up for you. Bring you some good conversation and touch on some topics that I think you're going to find super interesting. We've got a very, very good conversation lined up for you today. I feel like this is one of Benno's favourite topics. What do you think, Ben? It's something that you thought about.
It's sort of like a somewhat a staple of my life.
Yeah.
At some point.
Okay.
Yeah, you know.
All right. And I think we're going to get into it. We're going to disagree. And hopefully we're going to give you something to take away from the show. But most importantly, for the next half an hour, I think you're going to enjoy yourself. So my name is Sam. This is...
I'm Ben Urbano.
And welcome to Think Twice. Today, we're going to talk about hedonism. Now, hedonism is a philosophy that maximizes pleasure. So people who follow and ascribe to hedonism want to maximize the amount of pleasure that they feel in their life. Do you think that's an accurate description?
Yeah, it's sort of like to avoid things you dislike
and
to maximize the things that they do like. And however that gives them pleasure, basically.
Perfect. And I think when I was thinking about hedonism, I was thinking about what is pleasure to me. And the definition that makes the most sense to me is a feeling of excitement and ecstasy. And I think that's a nice sort of succinct summary of what hedonism is. What do you think?
I don't think you can actually like reduce it to that.
Yeah.
What would I think pleasure is like quite complex.
Yeah.
And however you find your pleasure, generally pleasure is like found in things like food and stuff, and like, but there also is pleasure and happiness in hard work, for example.
That's true. And I think, you know, the first question is gonna illuminate how we define pleasure. And that leads us quite nicely to it. I'm gonna ask you, does hedonism hinder personal growth? What do you think?
Of course not.
Of course not.
The reason why I think it can't hinder it is because if you understand your limits, you can then work back from it, right? So like, if you understand what you like and how much you like something, then you can work back from it. Whilst if you never explore that, you're never fully able to appreciate life in its essence.
So you get to figure out your own boundaries.
Precisely.
Right. But then once I've figured out my boundary, now there's no longer a need for hedonism. Would that be accurate?
No, because like hedonism is the pursuit of pleasure, right?
Right.
So if you're still pursuing pleasure, if you understand your boundaries, so for example, like, say I like burgers.
Sure.
It's not too far from the truth. Say I like burgers. And I then order 20 burgers to eat. And I find out that like I don't like 20 burgers.
Way too much.
A lot. And I only like 7 burgers.
7's still a lot.
Whatever, innit? Whatever, innit?
What?
I like 7 burgers, for example.
Yeah.
Next time I order my burgers, I order 7 instead of 20.
Yeah, but you've found out what the limit of your pleasure is, but the limit of what is actually good for you in burgers, you still haven't necessarily found that out. Do you see what I'm saying? So like, what is actually the right amount of burgers for your own physical health isn't 20, it's not 7, it's probably 1.
But that's not what is important.
But you were saying that hedonism allows you to find the boundaries of like what you like as a person, right?
Right.
And it allows you to grow personally, which is the question, right?
To confirm, you disagree with what I'm saying?
I disagree with what you're saying.
Okay,
we'll come to my points in a second. But at what point in that process of eating the burgers do you find out that actually it's healthy to have 1 burger? Do you see what I'm saying? Yeah,
but that's not... I don't think that's important.
But I thought that's what you're saying when you're talking about the boundaries.
No, so the boundaries I'm saying is essentially like how you improve, right? So the question is like, does it hinder personal growth or self-improvement? And the idea that if you understand your limits, you can basically then choose a way to pursue pleasure and pursue that happiness. And then you have personal growth and self-improvement.
That's fair. Look, my answer to the question would be, it definitely hinders personal growth. And to sort of go off what you're saying, that anecdote of the burger, to me, the aspect that's missing there, and the reason why hedonism doesn't allow for personal growth, is that it doesn't instill any discipline in you. You know what I mean? It is key factors to personal growth that are missing in hedonism for me. It's like pleasures that at the forefront of hedonism, and stuff like truth, authenticity, discipline, long-term thinking. Some of those things that fall to the wayside a little bit for me. So in the burger analogy, I could go to my doctor or talk to like a medical professional, and he could be like, Sam, one burger's enough. Burger, bit of chips, and you're good. And that's, to me, it's personal growth. I figured out that it's healthy for me to eat one burger. But nowhere in that equation do I need hedonism. Do I need to go over the top?
So this is like a common misconception with hedonism,
Right.
that like hedonism is about excess. And the problem with hedonism is there is problems with the ideology, and the problem is essentially that there is no framework to stop excess. But it doesn't mean excess is how you pursue pleasure. Does that make sense?
No. That's fair. I think that my actual core problem with hedonism is that pleasure is at the forefront, right? And I think we can agree that pleasure is a very key ingredient in hedonism, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't allow space for discipline and like long-term thinking, delayed gratification. Like, and these things I think are quite important to personal growth, wouldn't you? Like, if you wanted to develop yourself physically, right? You wanted to get fitter. How does hedonism allow you to get fitter?
But what we must understand is that, like, if I go on the back of your analogy, off the back of my analogy, if I then go to the doctor and he gives me this information, I may no longer receive pleasure from the 7 burgers because I understand this information. Do you understand what I mean?
But isn't the aim in the question personal growth?
Right, yeah.
The aim isn't necessarily pleasure. We're saying, is hedonism a good vehicle to get to personal growth, right?
Yeah.
And to me, the personal growth is limiting yourself to one burger. And if the doctor tells me that, and I know to do it, then I've done it. I've grown as a person because I've shown restraint. I want to eat more, but I've held back, and I've done the healthy option. Do you get what I'm saying? That's personal growth, no?
Yeah. But in the same way, eating 7 instead of 20 is personal growth also.
Yeah. You're not growing that much. You're still way overboard, right?
Well, and even if I use the analogy again, and it's sort of like I received this information and now I want pleasure, but I know this in the back of my head, but it won't give me pleasure if I eat 7 knowing 7's bad for me. Does that make sense?
But I don't think you should be eating 7, period. Maybe we've got different appetites, but...
Yeah, it's an analogy. It's not... It's a metaphor. It's not real life.
No. That's fair enough. That's fair enough. I think we could probably segue into the next question here.
Let's go to the next question.
I'll let you ask me the next question.
So, does hedonism empower individuals to prioritize self-care and happiness?
I think in the short term, yes, but in the long term, no. Because I think a lot of what the best things in life come from long-term thinking. Like I said, physical health, perfecting a craft or a skill, your relationships, all of that requires long-term thinking. And I think, unfortunately, hedonism is about now. I want pleasure now, and I want to feel that gratification in the short term. So I'd say it doesn't empower individuals to practice self-care in the long term. What do you think?
I totally understand that. But if we look at life as a whole, right? So we look at the cycle of life and we look at what we're trying to get out of life.
Sure.
And if we look at it that way, we have to understand what we enjoy and what brings us pleasure. Because if we understand that like pleasure and happiness are at the top of life, how do we reach those things? And in order to reach those things, I feel like hedonism plays a major role in that.
I disagree that pleasure is at the top of the pyramid, though. I just don't think pleasure is at the top of the pyramid. The best thing...
No, hold on. Let's stop right there. What do you think is at the top of the pyramid?
At the top of the pyramid, I say like what the point of life is.
Yeah.
A big thing that you would want to do in your life is to find meaning, right?
But you find meaning in order to
more
find
important than pleasure, or pleasure more important than finding meaning?
No. But why do you want to find meaning? In order to receive pleasure. In order to receive happiness. Joy.
But sure, but like the very existence of human beings is not one of pleasure. It's like one of suffering. And
That's perspective.
Sure, but like most of the people that have written about human experience recognize that a massive element of humanity and being a human is about suffering. It's not about like, oh, I want to live a perfect life where I don't suffer or I maximize pleasure. It's about finding meaning in your life and doing something that is worthwhile. And at the end of your life, having looked back and been like, that I lived a life worth living. Not I lived a life of pleasure. I don't think people on their deathbed look back and are like, I didn't have as much pleasure as I could have had. They're like, I didn't do as much meaningful stuff as I could have had. I didn't.
But I feel like what you're missing here clearly is the meaningful things bring pleasure.
They might bring a sense of contentment, but I don't think they bring pleasure. Like what? How would you define pleasure? Because I guess in my mind, pleasure is about excitement in the moment. Like pleasure is ecstasy in the moment. How would you define pleasure?
A feeling of happiness and enjoyment.
Okay. Would you say that feeling of pleasure works with long-term like goals and long-term thinking?
Most definitely.
So you can have long-term pleasure? Or is it a feeling that you feel now, like almost a physical sensation, and then...
I don't think it's a long-term feeling.
So you kind of agree with me, right? It's like almost a physical response that your body has to stimulus.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm saying contentment is something different to me. Yeah. Contentment is, you can actually be content for extended periods of your life.
Yes, I agree.
As opposed to like feeling pleasure.
Yeah.
And I think the meaning of life is to find contentment and not pleasure. Do you see the difference in our opinion? Yeah. And unfortunately, hedonism to me tends towards pleasure and not necessarily contentment. You can come back down from hedonism, like you don't...
You can come back down from pleasure.
From pleasure, correct, yeah. And that's my problem with it. And I think, going back to the question, you're not practicing self-care if you prioritize short-term physical sensation of happiness over long-term contentment. That's I guess.
Yes, yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
I would agree. I don't think it's a perfect ideology.
Sure.
In which there are no holes, no flaws. But like the idea that pleasure isn't at the top of it, because you can have, if you have a life full of contentment without pleasure, it's not a life worth living.
You sure about that?
Yes, really? I am pretty sure about that.
So what sort of things?
I feel like
what sort of things would make you content?
Like that's a hill I would die on. I'm not definite, but I feel that's a hill I would die on. Life's not worth living without pleasure.
It's difficult to say because you've had a lot of pleasure.
Yeah.
So you can't now go back and just like wipe it.
Yeah.
But I think you could have a life full of like real depth, meaning and contentment. And you'd be like, I had a life worth living. I'm sure there's some people like who really like live in suffering, right? They're born into suffering. They live a life of suffering, but they find meaning in that suffering. And obviously their struggle against some external force or oppression or something gives their life like meaning, right? And they resist. They strive. You know
what they do at the end of that? They celebrate. And that's the pleasure. That's the moment. See that moment there where all that hard work is done, all that grind is done, all that suffering is done. That celebration is the moment you remember and enjoy the most. And that's I think the pinnacle. And that's what you're always searching for, that bit of pleasure.
Listen, I don't disagree. I think it's a compelling point. But in my mind, I think someone who went through their life, for example, who was like fighting against some oppressor, right?
Yeah.
They were born into oppression, fought against that oppression, further. Right? So that would be an example.
I would hope that like at some point in their life though they did
Their life
experience
would be
pleasure.
better for it had they experienced that.
No, I'm not saying, like I said, maybe they don't get that end one, but at some point in that whole journey, they had some wins and were able to have some sort of pleasure.
Yeah, agreed.
So
Agreed.
to round it off, does hedonism empower individuals to prioritize self-care and happiness?
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I'm there with you. I'm convinced. All right, cool. So I think let's transition to the hottest segment on YouTube.
Run it.
It's a mad thing.
Run it.
Come on now. This is our moral dilemma. This is what the people come for. Let me not lie to you.
Yeah, man. When I show it to my friends, and they say, "I want to watch this one. I don't care what you lot."
Send me the whole episode now. That's what they say. I'm gonna let you do the honors this week.
You work for a company that created a paradise haven, and you can send one person free of charge. It's an island full of immediate pleasure and gratification. Your friend, who's been struggling recently with various different things, asked you if he can visit this extraordinary escape. However, when you visit the island, there's a good chance that they could become addicted. Do you let them go?
No, I don't. And it's difficult because he's going through it. And he could just go have a holiday. He needs a break. Sounds like he really does need a break. But I can't be complicit in him potentially becoming addicted. And from my understanding of addiction, when you have difficulty in your life, when you're feeling low, you might have low self-esteem, you're more vulnerable to addiction. So I would err on the side of no. What would you think?
I agree. And for the exact same reasons.
Really?
But would you go? Say you're having a tough time, because, we were talking about suffering, we all have to suffer at some point. Would you go?
I might go, It sounds lit. It sounds like it's popping. Would you go yourself?
100%.
Really? No doubt in your mind.
And even if you were the friend to ask me, I would let you go.
Yeah.
I'd say, yeah, go.
Because you know me.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And I think that is the essence of hedonism. Like, if you're somebody who is innately quite disciplined, you can indulge.
Right.
Because you're able to get back. Whilst, like, there are people who cannot simply just enjoy it for what it is and will go too far. Like, that's why we have, like, addiction with gambling, etc.
Right. I mean, in your life, what have you, like, seen makes people susceptible to addiction? Like,
personality traits, right?
Really?
Certain personality types that are more likely to fall victim to those kind of things.
Yeah.
Sportsmen, for example.
Right. You reckon athletes have it bad?
Oh, most definitely, because essentially they are competitive and they've experienced
that juice,
that pleasure. They've experienced that pleasure, exactly.
Right.
And as a result, and you obviously see it with artists who have performed in front of lots of people singing their songs, and when you experience what life can offer you at that sort of level, I guess you want more and more and more. So hedonism, I think, isn't a bad ideology.
Right.
What I think is bad about hedonism is essentially people's inability to control themselves.
But at some point, that becomes a flaw of hedonism and not necessarily the people. On some level, this is a human thing. And if hedonism exacerbates that, surely that's a flaw of hedonism on some level.
Yeah, but I have to push back on the idea that, like, nothing great comes without risk. So, like, the idea that you're going to reach a great height, the risk is you may fall from that height.
Right.
And not be able to get back there. And so I think it's important that the individual has to be disciplined enough or understand or be able to analyze and evaluate information as to what's good and what's bad in order to make the right decision and pursue pleasure how it's supposed to be pursued.
Fair enough. I do see that. This scenario actually derives from a scenario that has historically been talked about in philosophy called the pleasure experience. In the pleasure experience, the difference between our scenario and that one's permanent. You're basically suspended physically in a lab and your brain is plugged into this experience and you experience constant pleasure in a made-up simulation, right?
Yeah.
And that's permanent, a permanent state of being. If it was permanent to you in that scenario, how would your assessment of you going in yourself change? Would you still go in? Would you plug in?
So this idea of pleasure, would it? My reality is exactly the same.
Your reality is the same, but all you experience is wins and pleasure and absolutely no pain. You go through your normal life, but no pain whatsoever.
And I still experience the pleasure.
Yep. You experience it through the simulation. In reality, you're in
No. But what I wanna make clear is pleasure is directly tied to suffering. Do you understand what I mean? So like, if
it's a nice development.
Yeah,
I feel like maybe you're incorporating
I'm just saying,
some of my.
I'm just saying, if for my life because that's what you're saying. So you're experiencing pleasure consistently, right? And you're saying there's no suffering,
no pain.
So
no suffering.
only your pleasures just get higher and higher and higher. Is that what you're saying?
That's it.
Okay. Then most definitely.
You would.
Yeah, I think I would. Yeah.
You would plug into a simulation. You're in a lab. The real Benz is in a lab now.
But that's my reality, and I believe this to be true.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm talking about something that's never going to happen, so
right.
it's easy to give you an answer.
Yeah.
But
it don't make it less mad.
Yeah, I see why. I don't see why I wouldn't.
Really? So you don't think that there's something to be said for like it being real life and like experiencing, even if it's your reality that you're experiencing, it's still not real, right?
But you must understand, you must accept that this whole thing, this whole show, we sitting here in front of the cameras, us talking could not be real, right?
How?
Well, because this is our understanding of reality. What if the real Benz is plugged in somewhere? And this is what I'm experiencing, and not to say that's the case, but this is what I'm experiencing, and it feels completely real to me, and I'm enjoying it.
Do you think that there's a possibility you're plugged in somewhere?
No, I don't actually think that. I don't actually think that.
I was gonna be like, wait a minute.
I don't actually think that, but that's what I'm saying. That's basically the situation you would be in.
Yeah.
And if that is the case, why wouldn't I do that?
Because doesn't your life right now have meaning because you overcome stuff? Right? You had a serious knee injury recently. Multiple. And you overcame that. Doesn't that give your career in rugby colour? Doesn't that give your personality like life?
I totally understand that, but what we're saying is that in this place, I would have experienced a pleasure in which, say, I have scored a try, right?
Yeah.
And then the next game I had scored like 2.
Just keep scoring tries.
And then the next game I score 3.
You don't think at some point it just become meaningless to you? I'm just going to score tries
I'm
forever.
still achieving. So you see,
but go back to the adversity.
But the adversity, you've got to be clear. The adversity, when I score 3, would be that I overcame scoring 1. That's what would happen though. That is it, because it's all about perspective.
Right, you're saying relative to scoring 3, 1 is bad.
Precisely.
And it just gets better and better.
Exactly. Like, because for example, take the knee, for example. There are people that, there's actually a motivational speaker in Inky Johnson.
Yeah.
He made a tackle and he severed a nerve in his arm. He can't use his arm. A knee injury to that guy, it's fine. Do you know what I mean? Is that adversity at this point?
It is adversity. It's less adversity, but
that's what I mean. And the way we would see it in that simulation would be less adversity.
I do think that at some point it's a pendulum, and on one side there's adversity, and on the other side there's pleasure. Like, I don't think you can be like scoring 1 try versus 3 is adversity. Like,
but come on. Do you know when you called me the other day, right? After, if you don't know this, I play for England, right? And Tef called me. I didn't get long on the pitch, and he said, "Oh, like, this is not like reflective of your form. It's just how it goes sometimes.
Yeah,
charge it." There were times where I wasn't in the England squad. Now this feels horrible at that moment, right? Like that's happened, but there were times you weren't even in the England squad. And if you told someone then that this is your reality, that would be good. And that's what I mean by it's on a relative scale.
You're right about that. But the objective truth in all of that, in that scenario, is your ability. Someone who isn't as good as you would be happy to be there. Do you know what I mean? At some point, we do have to measure, okay, like Benz is sick. Benz should be on that pitch. And that is a fact that we can't get away from. So I agree it's relative. I really do agree it's relative. And had someone told you when you were a lot younger that you'd be playing England that same week, you'd be gassed. Do you know what I mean? But also, you're not the same player that you were back then. Do you know what I mean? You're a lot more experienced. You're a lot better as a player. So that is tempering the relativeness. Does that make sense? But it's a good point. Yeah. You know what I mean? I wasn't happy. Yeah. You should have been on that pitch earlier. What the fuck?
All right. That's us for today. I hope you learned how to pursue your pleasures and you will consistently and continue to do that, hopefully. Just don't go overboard, innit?
Yeah, don't eat 7 burgers. This is not financial advice.
Or 20. Much love. Take care, man.
In a bit.
It's recorded.
1 2 1 2. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Fingers crossed, bruv.
That was fucking good, that one, didn't it?
That was really good.
That was fucking good. Fair play to Hedonism, man. You came through.
Yeah.
Oh, fuck, it didn't record.
Fuck off. You didn't even get me for 1 second.